Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. If you want more Sandman, I have extra stories that are too spicy for the main feed available on my Patreon, and you can join at the free tier and get everything. Today we are back in the book of Filipino folklore written down by Mabel Cole. These are the stories of the Ifugao people who live in the mountains of the northern part of Luzon. The first story tells the beginning of death amongst the Ifugao, also known in Spanish as the Igorot. The second tells you why you need a good meal before gathering firewood. And the third story tells you why matching tattoos are a bad idea. And finally, the last story tells why the nickname Crumb Snatchers is universal. Okay, let's begin. How the first head was taken. One day the moon, who was a woman named Kabigat, set out in the yard making a large copper pot. The copper was still soft and pliable like clay, and the woman squatted on the ground with the heavy pot against her knees while she patted it and shaped it. Now while she was working, a son of Chalchal, the sun, came by and stopped to watch her mold the form. She pressed a stone against the inside of the jar, while on the outside she pounded it and slapped it with a wooden paddle dripping with water, until she had worked down the bulges and formed a smooth surface. The boy was greatly interested in seeing the jar grow larger, more beautiful, and smoother with each stroke, and he stood still for some time. Suddenly the moon looked up and saw him watching her. Instantly, she struck him with her paddle, knocking off his head. Now, the sun was not near, but he knew as soon as the moon had knocked off his son's head. And hurrying back to the spot, he put the boy's back head on, and he was alive again. Then the sun said to the moon, "You knocked off my son's head, and because you did this from now on, the earth's people will cut off each other's heads." The end. Story number 2, The Serpent Eagle. Once there lived 2 boys whose mother sent them into the forest every day to get wood for her fires. Every morning as they started out, she gave them some food for their trip. But it was always poor, and there was very little of it. And she would say, "The wood that you brought me yesterday was so poor that I cannot give you much to eat today." The boys tried very hard to please her. But if they brought her a nice pine wood, she scolded them. And if they brought her a large dried reeds, she said, "These are no good for my fire, for they leave so much ash in the house." Try as they could not satisfy her, and their bodies grew very thin from working hard all day and from not getting enough to eat. One morning, when they left for the mountains, their mother gave them a bit of dog meat to eat, and the boys were very sad, for they loved that dog very much. When they reached the forest, one of them said, "You wait here while I climb the tree and cut off some branches." He went up the tree and soon called out, "Here's some wood," and the bones of his arm dropped to the ground. "Oh," cried his brother, "this is your arm." "Here is some more wood," cried the other, and the bones of the other arm dropped to the ground. Then he called again, and the bones of his leg fell, and those of his other leg, and so on until all the bones of his body lay on the ground. "Take these home," he said, "and tell the woman that here is her wood. She only wanted my bones." The younger boy was very sad, for he was alone, and there was no one to go down the mountain with him. He gathered up the bundle of wood, wondering meanwhile what he should do. But just as he finished, a serpent eagle called down from the treetops, "I will go with you, brother." So the boy put a bundle of wood on his shoulder, and as he was going down the mountain, his brother, who was now a serpent eagle, flew over his head. When he reached the house, he put down the bundle and said to his mother, "Here is your wood." When she looked at it, she was very much frightened and ran out of the house. Then the serpent eagle circled around and around above her head and called out, Qui kok, qui kok, qui kok. I do not need your food anymore. Then the younger brother and the serpent eagle lived in the hut together. The end. Okay, and story number 3, The Tattooed Men. Once there were 2 young men who were very good friends. They were unhappy because neither one of them had been tattooed. They felt that they were not as beautiful as their friends. One day, they agreed to tattoo each other. One marked the breast and the back of the other, his arms and legs, and even his face. And when he had finished, he took the soot off the bottom of the cooking pot and rubbed it into all the marks. And he was tattooed beautifully. The one who had done the work said to the other, "Now, my friend, you are very beautiful, and you must tattoo me." Then the tattooed one scraped a great pile of black soot off the cooking pots, and before the other one knew what he was about, he had rubbed it all over him from top of his head to the bottom of his feet, and he was very black and greasy. The one who was covered with soot became very angry and cried, "Why do you treat me like this, when I tattooed you so carefully?" They began to fight, but suddenly the beautiful tattooed one became a great lizard, which ran away and hid in the tall grass, while the sooty one became a crow and flew over the village. The crow and the lizard hate each other to this very day. The end. Okay, and the final story. Tilin, the rice bird. One day, when a mother was pounding out rice to cook for supper, her little girl ran up and cried, "Oh, mother, give me some of the rice to eat." "No," said the mother, "it is not good for you to eat until it is cooked. Wait for supper." But the little girl persisted until the mother, out of patience, cried, "Be still. It is not good for you to talk so much." When she had finished pounding the rice, the woman poured it into a thresher and tossed it into the air many times. As soon as the chaff was removed, she emptied the rice into her basket and covered it with the winnower. Then she took the jar upon her head and started for the spring to get water. Now the little girl was fond of going to the spring with her mother, for she loved to play in the cool water while her mother filled the jars. But this time she did not go, and as soon as the woman was out of sight, she ran down to the basket of rice. She reached down to take a handful of the grain. The cover slipped so that she fell, and then she was covered up in the basket. When the mother returned to the house, she heard a bird crying, "King, king, nick, nick, nick." She listened carefully, and the sound seemed to be coming from the basket, and so she removed the cover. To her surprise, out hopped a little brown rice bird, and it flew away, calling back, "Goodbye, mother, goodbye, goodbye, mother. You would not give me any rice to eat." And so the little girl turned into a rice bird, and continues to hunt for rice to this very day. The end. Alright, these stories were a bit short. I was expecting more, but they were interesting nevertheless. The first story was interesting just because it showed that the kid was just a bit annoying, just because he was watching her. And the second story seemed sad. I was wondering why the mom was underfeeding them, and especially dog meat. And the final story explains why there are rice birds, which are the bane of many South and East Asian communities. If rice is the main crop, you don't want to have it all eaten up by these little birds. And the podcast shoutout is to the Rewatch Recap. Hosted by the best Dustin in podcasting, this show goes over your favorite books and shows from the 90s and 2000s. He covers shows such as My So-Called Life, Ghost Rider, and Glee. He also hosts Dustin Can Read, and as you can tell, he loves books and shows, especially horror or slightly spooky shows. And if you love his show as much as I do, go and give him a like, a rating, and a review. And the listener shout-out is to Shanghai, China. Originally a fishing village, this city started booming as a port that was opened after the First Opium War. It sits on the Huangpu branch of the Yangtze River. It is also a major hub for finance, and is the third largest city in the world, with 24 million people living in the city proper. The city's nickname is Hu, a shortening of a phrase meaning harpoon ditch. It's also called the New York of China because it reminds many people of the American city. The city also boasts of a large number of Russian and Jewish immigrants from the turn of the 20th century. And Chris, the host of the History of China podcast, lived through the 2 months of lockdown that the city endured during the corona outbreak. I would love to see this city, and so to my one listener in Shanghai, I say in Shanghainese, which is not Mandarin and not Cantonese, I say, Ya ya and Wo-a. Thank you, and good night.